Yo! Welcome back to One More Mana. My name's Derek, and today I am so excited because I teased it last week. I mentioned that y'all were in for a treat, and it's because I am deck teching my all-time favorite commander deck today, and that is my Vial Smasher and Thrasios Villainous Wealth deck. This deck is so much fun. This deck is just insane in so many ways. Really, I've played so many iterations of this Vial Smasher Thrasios shell over the few years I've been playing Commander, and this deck's my baby. I've been working on it and basically tweaking it as much as I could every so often. This is what I invest most of my time and unfortunately all my money into as well. I love this deck so much. So it's gone through a number of shells. It started as just a general spell slinger deck. It had kind of a copy type deck. There was a Hydra, like a attacking aggressive deck version it went through. And now it's in this Villainous Wealth shell. And this is my favorite one so far, and I love it. But I'm actually super interested in actually deck teching all the variations of this shell because they play so drastically differently. I think there's kind of a different shell or a different version of the deck for each different type of playstyle. So definitely let me know down below if you want to see the deck techs of the other versions of this deck as well, because I would love to do them. So with this deck, first we'll take a look at the commanders, and I'll let you know kind of how the deck is going to run. So these are partner commanders. If you aren't familiar with it, though, that is a mechanic that was introduced back in Commander 2016. So we start with Thrasios, Triton Hero. He is a beast. This is one of those commanders that can be played in competitive decks. It's so strong, and it's because really if you just make infinite mana, you play all your lands, draw all your cards. Now I don't really have an interest in making infinite mana. We'll get into the way the deck will play in a minute. But it doesn't even matter. You don't need infinite mana. If you have a lot of mana and you can sink it into Thrasios, just getting to throw all your lands onto the battlefield and draw all those cards gets insane. The value you get to have ramp and card draw on a 2 CMC commander is broken. Then the next commander is Vial Smasher the Fierce. She is amazing. She basically says whenever you cast your first spell, she's just going to throw a little Vial of Dragonfire at somebody's face for whatever the CMC of that spell is. And one important note with this card, especially because I mentioned Villainous Wealth is really the star of the deck. With X spells, anywhere else other than the stack, X is 0 and Villainous Wealth would just be a 3 CMC card. But on the stack, it's whatever you pumped into X. So with Vial Smasher, with that cast trigger, it is going to be whatever that total mana you spent is. So if you cast Villainous Wealth for 50, where X is 47, Vial Smasher is throwing 50 damage at someone's face. And there's a lot of different things that are important. First of all, it's a cast trigger, so even if you counter the spell, you still get that Vial Smasher thrown at somebody. And what's also crazy is a rule I actually learned relatively recently, despite playing this deck all the time. You can actually redirect that damage to Planeswalkers as well, which is even crazier. So early game, if someone's playing, got a Planeswalker out, you hit him with your Vial Smasher. It is random, but if you do happen to hit them, you can redirect that to Planeswalkers, which is nuts. Alright, so now looking at this deck, the way it's going to play, really what you want to do is lay low. There's a lot of ways to protect yourself, a lot of kind of board control. You have a lot of removal, some board wipes, stuff like that, and just kind of ways to lay low and just ramp like crazy. Really, the whole point of this deck is, again, to cast that Villainous Wealth, but the way we're going to do it is with as many copies of Cabal Coffers as possible. This deck really has like 5 commanders. I'm sorry, I know it's going all over the place. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This is a 4-colored deck. Why are we running Cabal Coffers? So basically, the whole deck is all about land tutors, and it's basically most of the ramp is all functioning as land tutors. And what I mean by that is most of the ramp cards search for any land, not just basics. So we can very consistently go out and get our Urborg to turn everything into swamps and Cabal Coffers. And then go and get more and more Cabal Coffers. And through all the recursion, specifically land recursion we have, even removing these lands is really nothing but a speed bump in this deck. So we got a whole bunch of ways. And when I get into the lands and some of the other cards, I'll mention it. But there's ways to get as many as 4 Cabal Coffers on the battlefield at one time. And that, if you've ever played with 1 Cabal Coffers, you know how insane that is. And to consistently be able to get 2 to 3 out in a game, the mana gets ridiculous. And that kind of goes with this whole theme where I want to produce as much mana as finitely possible without a single way to go infinite. I want to get crazy combinations of cards to produce hundreds and hundreds, no exaggeration, of mana, pump it all into a Villainous Wealth, and just watch the world burn. So the first 3 creatures I'm going to talk about are the 3 Eldrazi Titans. We have Emrakul, the Promised End, we have Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, and we have Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger. These are insane. insane. I love these so much for a number of reasons. One, they're huge mana sinks, which is amazing. They're huge Vial Smasher triggers. We want that. But in addition, they have amazing cast triggers. And those cast triggers are what we're the most concerned about, because nothing is worse than pumping a whole bunch of mana into something, having it countered, and just you wasted it. With Vial Smasher, that's almost never the case. When we pump big mana into spells, we're at least throwing damage. And then with these, we get the cast triggers as well. Another just amazing card is Spark Double. Spark Double is amazing. It lets you break the legend rule. That's all you need to know about the card. It lets you break the legend rule and get a second Vial Smasher. And like I said, when we're casting these huge spells, it is random. I think it's the most fun part about the deck is throwing that damage around randomly, because while it can be a super strong deck, but it does kind of limit some level of it when a lot of the damage is thrown around random. But if there's a huge threat at the table, it's nice to have those two Vial Smasher triggers. Then you just gotta, what I think the in game nights they call it the Lords of Chaos for all the random stuff. You just gotta pray to the Lords of Chaos and hope that damage goes where you need it to go. Spark Double makes it even easier, because you get double the chances of rolling those dice and seeing who those Vials of Dragonfire are gonna hit right in the face. The next one I'm going to talk about might be the most powerful card in the deck, and it's Seedborn Muse. Seedborn Muse will win you the game. Very rarely, and I tend to wait to cast my Seedborn Muse until I'm at a point where I can produce a decent amount of mana, but almost every time I've ever played Seedborn Muse, if it makes it one round of the table, I'm going to win that game. The amount of value, basically because you just sink all your mana into Thrasios, throw all your lands into play, draw all those cards. But all those lands you get just thrown into play, they come in tap, but they untap with Seedborn Muse on the next turn. And you can keep doing that. And if you can do that 4 times in a round of the table, that value, it's hard to come back from. And even at that point, when your opponents become aware, and if they start trying to target you, they might not be able to do anything about it, because you just have way too many resources to deal with. Taking a look at the artifacts, the first card I'm going to talk about is Doubling Cube. This card gets silly. With Doubling Cube, you do have to be producing at least 7 mana before you see any increase in it. But the gains of mana get crazy, because when you have, I just mentioned all those Cabal Coffers, when you get some of these mana totals, this is really one of the cards that's going to get you to the point of getting to that, instead of getting the 20 to 30, getting into that, 50 to 60 range. And you can do that relatively early with a card like this. Another artifact I have to talk about is Vidalcan Orrery. This is one of those cards that it's so crucial to how this deck runs, because you want instant speed stuff. You want to be able to hold your mana up and then sink all your mana at the right time. It's a bad feeling when you can produce 50 mana and you want to sink it all. Maybe you want to sink it into Thrasios, or you want to sink it into a Villainous Wealth. But if you do that on your turn, somebody counters it. You might get the Vial Smasher trigger, which is amazing, but then you're tapped out and the whole table can just go ahead and deal with you. Vidalcan Orrery allows you to hold up your mana, have answers, and then do stuff on the end step before your turn, so you don't have to worry about everyone trying to take you out, which in a deck like this is a realistic possibility if they see it run a couple times. Moving on to the Planeswalkers, I'm running just one Planeswalker, and it's Tamiyo, Collector of Tales. This card is perfect in this deck. It is absolutely insane. And not to mention, I play the alternate art Japanese one, and it is beautiful. That helps too. But it has a static ability, which is awesome, because it doesn't let opponents cause you to either discard cards or sacrifice your permanents, which is great, because in a deck where there's a lot of times where Vial Smasher is the only creature, maybe you'll also have Thrasios out, and if you're playing against like a Dictate of Erebos or something like that with a token deck, it can be tough because you just can't keep them on the board. This takes care of that. And you don't want to be discarding your resources, of course, so that's always great. But it's really the Planeswalker abilities that are the most fun. Now, the minus of getting a card back from the graveyard is awesome. That's probably the most useful effect. And really, to be honest, it's there for either Villainous Wealth or Cabal Coffers. People are going to be killing your Cabal Coffers, so this is a great way to get it back to hand. Just keep replaying it. But the plus is where the most fun comes in. Or you name a non-land card, and then you reveal the top 4. And then if it's there, you put it in your hand, put the rest in the graveyard. We don't mind having stuff in the graveyard, especially because we are running a lot of recursion. But the best thing to do with this is every time I name Villainous Wealth. I don't care. I don't know where Villainous Wealth is in the deck. I have no reason to believe it's in those top 4, but it's just so much fun every time to just name Villainous Wealth, slowly flip those cards over, and just watch in anticipation just to see if you get lucky and it happens to be there. Looking at the enchantments, obviously I just mentioned Vidalcan Orrery. Leyline of Anticipation is going to be there as well. Same exact role, same exact reason, and just as good. The next one I'm going to talk about is Mana Reflection, and it is one of the few true mana doublers in Magic. Most of the time when people refer to mana doublers, they're talking about stuff that adds an additional mana when you tap a land. So in effect, it's doubling your lands when you tap them. This doubles the amount of mana tapped by any permanent. That Sol Ring's tapping for 4 now. That Cabal Coffers is tapping for way too much. And that doubling cube is just blowing up with mana. And the last enchantment I'm going to talk about is Wilderness Reclamation. This solves that same problem I was just talking about with your Seedborn Muse. Obviously not quite as powerful, but that feeling is great. To be able to go ahead and tap out, sink a whole bunch of mana into Thrasios or sink it into a big spell, and then be able to hold your mana up. So much of this deck is reliant on keeping mana up to be able to defend yourself and keep options open on other people's turns, and this lets you do that without having to, go light on your own turn. Looking at the sorceries, the 3 I really want to talk about are Hour of Promise, Pierce Whim, and Tempt with Discovery. The reason I want to talk about these is these are those land tutors. It's ramp, but you get specific lands. Hour of Promise is my favorite by far because you go get Urborg Cabal Coffers right on the spot. You don't have to worry about with Tempt with Discovery. You can do that. People might go get their Strip Mine and stuff like that. And Pierce Whim is great. Also, you get one, and then everybody's got to go ahead and sacrifice an artifact or enchantment, or unless you're feeling friendly, you're giving everybody else lands too. But these cards all allow you to go get that Urborg Cabal Coffers and get it consistently. Kind of along similar lines, we're running Scape Shift, which is going to do something similar, where you can just sack any number of lands and get specific lands. Again, you don't have to worry about basics. You get whatever lands you want, throw them onto the battlefield. That is amazing. And the coolest part about this is it does get some lands into your graveyard, which might help with this next card, Life from the Loam. Now, Life from the Loam is one of my favorite cards in the deck because, like I said, that Cabal Copper is going to be a target, and we need to be able to recur it. We have a bunch of generic graveyard recursion to get things back. And really, I've noticed no problem with the deck. If someone gets rid of the Cabal Copper, very rarely will it stay gone for more than a turn or two. It's almost always coming right back. Life from the Loam is one of the best ways to make sure you just keeps coming back and back. The coolest thing with this card is dredging doesn't really hurt in this deck. With Thrasios, you have such a big mana sink to draw cards whenever you feel like it. Not drawing that first card really doesn't matter much, and especially if you can get that Life from the Loam back, just replay that Cabal Coffers. It's great value, and you're going to be drawing a whole lot more than that one card with that Cabal Coffers out. And obviously, Villainous Wealth is in this category, but I gotta save it for the game-winning step. You already know, so I'm gonna get more into detail with this card a little later. So looking at the instance, the first one I'm gonna talk about is Constant Mist. This card is another all-star in this deck. I mentioned you want to be able to protect yourself and kind of lay low and not let just people kill you out of nowhere. Constant Mist is a great way to do this. To be able to spend 2 mana, sack a land, cast it, and bring it right back is insane. If you're in a situation where you know you're the target, you can keep this up and you can just fog a couple times. If people know it's in your hand after that first time, they may be hesitant unless they have a counter spell ready to even attack you because they don't even want to waste their effort. This is a great way to keep yourself alive if you're at a stage of the game where you're about to go off. The next one's Crop Rotation. Crop Rotation is so good because, again, tutoring for a land. Instant speed tutoring for a land. To be able to play a land at instant speed is ridiculous. There's a reason why lands aren't able to be played at instant speed basically at any other time. And this gets around that, and to be able to sneak something out, whether it's that, if you want to sneak out a Cabal Coffers at one point, want to sneak out a Glacial Chasm, which we'll get into later, it's a super powerful card. The next couple cards are cards you want with Villainous Wealth, and that just gets so much more value off of it. And it's going to be Narset's Reversal and Reverberate. This is ridiculous because we're pumping so much mana into Villainous Wealth. So to be able to spend, get a 50-something mana Villainous Wealth and then copy it just for 2 more mana, that's either going to just take one person out of the game or cast basically half of 2 players' libraries. And at that point, if you're casting half of somebody's deck, I would hope, I don't know how their deck building is, but I would hope you'd be winning the game at that point. And it is crazy. It is so strong with Narset's Reversal. My favorite part about this is it's not copying in the sense you don't get the 2 targets, but you get the Villainous Wealth right back. It's also a great protection for counter spells because if someone goes to counter in response to Narset's Reversal, you get a copy, get it back. You're still getting that huge cast, and you're able to play it again. Now, the land base. This is one of the few decks where I might spend more time talking about the lands than I did any other category because the lands are the most important part of this deck. The lands make this deck go. The reason we're running so many lands is because you can never have enough. Really, Thrasios is always there to sink mana into to keep drawing cards. You can scry stuff away if you don't want any more lands, and some of these utility lands, you need slots for them. So we're going to start with Alchemist Refuge. Alchemist Refuge is, again, Godolphin Ori, Leyline of Anticipation. The difference is Alchemist's Refuge is much harder to remove. And in this deck, it's super easy to quote-unquote tutor for because we have all the land tutors. So this is just an amazing card. And people forget about it. Even if you use it a couple times, it's just sitting there with your lands. People forget you can just flash something crazy out at instant speed. Obviously, we're running Cabal Coffers. I've talked about it a whole bunch of times at this point. But with Cabal Coffers, we also have Vesuva and Thespian Stage. And those are both there to make copies of this Cabal Coffers to get, again, just as many copies as we can. That's 3 of them. The 4th one we're going to get into in a little bit in that game-winning step now. But these are just phenomenal cards. To be able to, and the utility with Vesuva, if it's early in the game, make it a second command tower, make it a second land that you need for that color of mana. The deck isn't dependent on having any specific one. Really, even with just one Cabal Coffers, you can just go off and win with this deck. It's just more fun to have more than one. That's why we get to those hundreds of mana. It's not always about winning. It's about doing it with style sometimes, and that's why we need so many Cabal Coffers. But these cards do a great job at imitating the effect. Not to mention, when you get 3 Cabal Coffers out, it makes it much, much harder to deal with as far as, from the opponent's standpoint. The next one is Glacial Chasm. This card has saved me more times than I think any other card I've ever played. Glacial Chasm, not a lot of players run land removal, and the players that do don't run enough of it, and Glacial Chasm is ridiculous. You get a Glacial Chasm out, forget the fact your creatures can't attack, forget sacking a land, forget the cumulative life loss on upkeep, that doesn't matter. You can't take damage. You cannot take damage, which is just essentially just a safe pass for a while. And now, obviously, you don't want to feel too safe. If someone goes ahead and plays Strip Mine, all of a sudden, your shields are down. But it's insane how many times I've played this, and it takes 2-3 turns of the table before someone can deal with it. Just because people don't play enough land destruction. And to get, again, in a deck like this, if you get that many turns to kind of just do your own thing, ramp and get stuff ready, that's enough to win the game. Obviously, we're running Urborg as well to pair with Cabal Coffers. I keep talking about Cabal Coffers, haven't mentioned Urborg as much. You do need them out in combination. Cabal Coffers with no Urborg really isn't doing anything for you in this deck. But like I mentioned, you always want to go for Urborg first. It's actually, there's a lot of utility lands in this deck, especially like Glacial Chasm is a great example. Glacial Chasm with Urborg out taps for mana, which is awesome. So always go ahead and get that Urborg first to get yourself set up. And then once you get the Cabal Coffers out, take advantage of the fact that everything's a swamp. But even in the meantime, just having all your utility lands be able to tap for colored mana is really cool. All right, so that's all the categories of cards. Now we're going to get into the best part of the game, and it's the game-winning step. Now, there's a very simple way that we're going to win the game with this deck almost every time, and that may seem boring, but because it's so, there's variation within this sameness, if that makes sense, and it's going to be Villainous Wealth. We are going to Villainous Wealth people. Now, Vial Smasher might be the one throwing damage at someone's face and killing them just off the cast trigger. Or we might just be Villainous Wealthing somebody for so many cards and just playing so many cards from the library that nobody else can deal with the value. Or we might be just straight up milling somebody and the X value might be so big that you just exile their entire library, cast whatever you feel like, and then they're gone. That it is ridiculous. And the most fun thing about it is, while you can just explode and exile someone's entire library, take them out, cast all their cards, I've actually found the most fun is when you go ahead, cast it in smaller chunks. If you can make 50 mana, maybe only cast it for 25, spend the rest on a Thrasios and keep some mana up to defend yourself, and just play a good chunk of somebody's deck. It's so much fun, because sometimes when you Villainous Wealth somebody, you're playing a completely different style of deck. There's times where you Villainous Wealth a Voltron deck, a whole bunch of equipment, and all of a sudden you're playing a Voltron style in this deck that you never expected. Or you Villainous Wealth a token deck, you make a whole bunch of tokens. It is crazy. And there's even the possibility of, if you're playing a combo deck, to Villainous Wealth them, steal their combo, and win with that. So the next way to win the game is a card called Expropriate. This card is just ridiculous. I'm sure people know about it, and if you don't, I just hope nobody plays it against you. It's crazy. So it's 9 mana, and really, everyone at the table gets to pick whether they give you an extra turn, or you get to take one of their permanents. And no matter what happens, there's some life advice. Always pick money. Never pick time. Because if you give somebody, the person's already getting an extra turn, so in this case, you're already getting an extra turn just for casting it, because you can't take one of your own permanents. Now, if other people start going and giving you extra turns, especially in a deck like this, that's game over. If you're able to just take back-to-back-to-back turns like that in a deck where you can sink your mana, draw all these cards, get all this mana out, set up for that massive Villainous Wealth, yeah, that's game over. And the next way to win the game is Exsanguinate. I love this card so much. I tend to try to only use this card in emergency situations. I love being able to basically hold up all my mana if my life total gets low, hold up, you got all these instant speed effects with Vidalcan Orrery, you got Leyline, and you got Alchemist Refuge, and just hold up that Exsanguinate. And if someone does try to attack you and take you out of the game, being able to just flash out an Exsanguinate for an insane amount of mana and either kill the whole table, or even just use it enough to just get your life total to a respectable amount is great. And it's normally this is the primary win con on a lot of decks, but I do love in this deck using it as that sort of protection to be able to beef your life total back up. Regardless though, if you need to, this will win you the game. Alright, so those are all the ways to win the game, but there's another category I do want to talk about special for this video, and it is just a card that is so good in this deck that I needed to give it its own spotlight, and it's Mirage Mirror. Mirage Mirror does whatever you want it to do. If you want an extra Cabal coffers, it can be that for you. If you want it to be a mana reflection, it can be that too. It can be a doubling cube. It can be another Seedborn Muse. It can do whatever you want it to do, and it's ridiculous. The highest I've ever gotten with mana in this deck was right around that 300 range, and that was a time where I was able to get Mana Reflection, Mirage Mirror as a copy of that Mana Reflection along with the whole Cabal Coffers doubling cube situation. And don't ask me how all those stuck around, I'm still not sure, but things get silly, and the flexibility of the card is so insane. It can become creatures to protect you if you need it to. Again, it can become all these different lands in situations where somebody tries to blow up your Glacial Chasm. It can become a Glacial Chasm for that turn to protect you. It does everything you need it to do. In this deck, at no point do you feel better than when you have Mirage Mirror out. So that's going to do it for this week's deck tech. I really, really hope you guys enjoyed this deck. I really hope I was able to kind of get across how ridiculous this deck is. It is so much fun. Again, sit back, ramp as hard as you can. Always have a pen and a calculator ready because those mana amounts are going to get crazy, and see what happens. Villainous Wealth is one of those cards that it's just so hard to get across how much fun it can be because you don't know what's going to get cast off of it. In most of the deck techs, you can go down and exactly what the game plan is, what you're going to play, what's going to happen. And while I was able to talk about a lot of the aspects of this deck, what's missing is the chaos that comes from that Villainous Wealth. Being able to just cast a whole bunch of somebody's library, it is great because if maybe you're in the mood to play an aggro deck that night, you don't have to worry about building a whole new deck. Play your Villainous Wealth deck, pick the aggro player, Villainous Wealth them, get a whole bunch of those aggro cards. If they're playing, you want a burn deck, pick the burn player. You want a Super Friends deck? Why not just Villainous Wealth the Super Friends deck and get a whole bunch of Planeswalkers to play and see how it is. It is the ultimate playtesting deck because you get to play all types of different deck styles with it. So I would love to hear what you guys think. Please let me know. And also, like I said, let me know if you want me to do the other iterations of the deck as well because they are a lot of fun and the deck plays so differently. Other than the Commanders, it's just a completely different deck. Let me know what you think. If any of you have really cool Vial Smasher Thrasios builds, I know it is a very flexible Commander pairing. You can put a lot of different decks in that shell. Please let me know. And as always, to all the patrons, we really do love and appreciate y'all. Thank you for everything. But yes, as always, I will see you guys next time.